Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to reconvene and to welcome the viewing and listening audience to the 12th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. This public hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I would like to welcome here with us officials from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the Child Protection Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as well as the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education. My name is Dr. Nian Gadsbidoli, and I'm the chairman of this Joint Select Committee, and I'd like now to invite the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with Senator Samuel.
Roger Samuel, member. Morning.
Kazam Hussain, member.
Vidya Gaidin Gopi Singh, member.
Glenda Jennings-Smith, member.
Dennis Moses, member.
Thank you, committee. And now I would like to ask the representatives who are here with us to introduce themselves as well. Please begin with the Children's Authority.
Safia Noel, Director, Children's Authority.
Crystal Jamon, Deputy Director, Care Legal and Regulatory Services, Children's Authority.
Harry Lal Zitran, Chief Education Officer.
Pleasant good morning. Leno Batiste Simmons, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Stephen Williams, Commissioner of Police Acting.
Good morning. Beverly Paul, Inspector of Police, Child Protection Unit.
Good morning. Beverly Rodriguez, Acting Superintendent in charge of the Child Protection Unit.
Bernadette Seeley of the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the TTPS.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm sorry, please continue.
Darlene Smith, Guidance Officer 2, Student Support Services Division.
Good morning. Ashram Diraj, Director of School Supervision, Ministry of Education.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. Trinidad and Tobago has signed and ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child, 1989, and the World Fit for Children, 2002, that protect the rights of children and include a provision to protect children from all forms of abuse and violence. This morning, we would have opened our newspapers to be greeted with two stories that are really very relevant to what we are doing here. The first was the story about Wayne Griffith, who has been charged with assaulting his 60-year-old son. And the gruesome details of that assault really resonate with us as we look at what we are investigating and inquiring about today in terms of child abuse. And the other one that resonates with us is a story that has been making the papers for a number of days with respect to young Tristan Khan, who has undergone bullying at school to the extent that he is now in the hospital with a broken arm and complications from that incident. Article 19 of the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child states, children have the right to be protected from being hurt and mistreated, physically or mentally. Governments should ensure that children are properly cared for and protect them from violence, abuse, and neglect by their parents or anyone else who looks after them. And as we look at Article 48 of a World Fit for Children, it states, societies must eliminate all forms of violence against children, protecting them from all forms of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and violence, from the impact of armed conflict, from all forms of sexual exploitation, including pedophilia, trafficking, etc. And it goes on to talk about the different things that we need to protect children from. And today, we are looking at child abuse in Trinidad and Tobago and looking at the systems in place to protect children from child abuse and the legislation as well that goes along with that. And so we as the inquiry has developed, the objectives of this inquiry today, specifically, to examine the adequacy of programs and services for detection, reduction, and treatment of child abuse and teenage pregnancy, and B, to determine the adequacy of legislation in protecting children from abuse. And this is something that is very important in our society generally, and specifically based on recent articles in our newspapers and things that have been going on in our country. It really is critical that we take a look at how we are protecting our children. I would like to remind viewers and listeners that you can send the committee questions related to today's topic via email at parl101@ttparliament.org or on our Facebook page at TT Parliament or Twitter at TT Parliament. At this time, I'd also like to acknowledge receipt of 2 stakeholder submissions requested from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, UNICEF, and the Institute of Gender, UWI St. Augustine. At this point in time, I would like to invite the officials who are here with us to make brief opening statements. Again, we can start with the Children's Authority.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having the Children's Authority at this inquiry. The overarching objective of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is to promote the well-being of all children, provide care and protection for vulnerable children, and ensure compliance with national legislation and obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The authority has been operational for a period of 20 months as the package of children's legislation was proclaimed in May 2015. At the authority, 6 units are presently tasked with the responsibility to treat with child abuse reports and provide appropriate interventions. They work collaboratively and cross-functionally to achieve the ultimate goal of assessing the overall well-being of the child, ensuring that the child is not at risk of danger or harm, and providing the best treatment and care recommendations for the child's rehabilitation. The successes of the organization's interventions can be gauged by assessing whether persons receiving services such as counseling and psychotherapy experience improvements in their symptoms and functioning across a range of life domains. Client and service providers' feedback is also a useful method utilized to measure the success of the authority's interventions. Most of the treatment interventions recommended for our clientele are not widely available in the public sector and therefore are very costly. In several cases, the authority has had to pay for these services ourselves. This, however, is not sustainable given the limited funds available to the authority. We therefore require additional funding to ensure that key services are accessed for our vulnerable clients. In cases of a child being pregnant as a result of sexual abuse, we focus on interventions that will secure the child's best interest, such as placement, assessment, and counseling. The monitoring of the child and her family after the birth of the baby is also critical. While the staff in these 6 units work tirelessly in the best interest of children, these units are not adequately staffed to respond to the volume of child abuse reports received. Consequently, there is an inevitable delay in the reports being investigated, children waiting to be assessed, and children referred for interventions and case management. Additionally, the authority is presently operating just over 50% of its human resource capacity based on the approved establishment. So there is also an urgent need for expansion of the authority's staff. There's also an urgent need for facilities within Trinidad and Tobago. Places of safety, reception centers, transition facilities, hostels, and additional assessment centers are needed in order to meet the requirements of the legislation and the caseload of the authority. The absence of these facilities can compromise the quality of care provided to children in need of care and protection. Also, the authority continues to advocate very strongly for the development of a national protocol for child abuse. This protocol, it is hoped, will be approved by the Cabinet, which will be binding on all relevant ministries and their subsidiary agencies. To date, there is a draft national protocol on child abuse, enshrining all the agreed protocols with the stakeholders. However, the protocol requires finalization before implementation. Comprehensive training and retraining we see as also a critical factor, as the professionals providing services to these children require that need to improve on their skills constantly and to learn from the experiences had. Overall, the authority works diligently with limited resources. Nevertheless, additional human resources and financial resources will go a long way in improving the service delivery to the children of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Madam Chair and committee members, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could we have the statement from the Ministry of Education?
The Ministry of Education is charged with the responsibility for the holistic development of learners, students in the education system. The Ministry of Education provides programs and services to address the issue of child abuse and teenage pregnancy, mainly through the Student Support Services Division. This unit was created by Cabinet in 2004 to provide services to students who have significant learning disabilities, need guidance for academic, personal, social, and career development, have emotional, behavioral, and social difficulties, have learning, vision, or mobility challenges, are gifted and talented, or are educationally disadvantaged. The Ministry of Education applies the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services definition and the National Legislative Framework for Child Abuse by defining child abuse as any act or inaction on the part of a parent or caregiver which results in the neglect, physical harm, sexual abuse, or sexual exploitation of a child 18 years and under. The Ministry of Education, the services are divided into either preventive or responsive. The preventive programs are built into the guidance curriculum of Trinidad and Tobago, which states that the primary goal seeks to impact specific skills and learning opportunities in a proactive and preventative manner. The curriculum consists of assisting students to develop attitude, skills, and knowledge to manage change successfully, accept and take responsibility for feelings, ensure personal safety, and enhance relationship skills. With respect to the responsive initiatives, the ministry has taken a number. We have adopted quite a number of programs, and it really speaks to child rights and responsibilities, and our target audience, our parents, our teachers, our students. We have initiated a number of programs, anti-bullying programs. We have done support of understanding your special needs child. We have been looking at gang violence. We have understanding our teenagers. So we have adopted quite a number of programs. In implementing our programs, we have noted a number of challenges, one of which critically is the staffing of our Student Support Services Division. That unit consists of around 500 persons, but we have recognized the ratio of guidance officers, school social workers to the number of student population and the number of incidents that it seems and it appears that we need more of our guidance officers or school social workers out there in the school system. We have also been working with a number of stakeholders throughout Trinidad and Tobago in executing our programs. A number of stakeholders that we have been working with include the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services through the Social Welfare and National Family Services, the Ministry of Health, the Office of the Prime Minister and Gender Affairs and Child Development, the Judiciary, the Ministry of National Security, CBOs, FBOs that include Mary Care, Choices Program, Serval, Rape Crisis Association, Childline, Safe Home, Trinidad and Tobago Coalition Against Domestic Violence, YMCA, ALTA, and Family Planning. We looking at our data and looking at the incidents in our schools, we know that the Ministry of Education, again, has to partner to develop partnerships, have to work with the communities to develop a number and a range of programs that targets and ensures that our children are safe both within our school, on our school compound, as well as in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to recognize the representatives from the Child Welfare League. Thank you so much for being here with us, and invite them to make their statement after the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service does their opening statement.
Honorable Chairman and members of the committee, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is the main law enforcement agency in Trinidad and Tobago, charged with the responsibility for addressing crime and criminality across the land by way of special focus as it relates to matters affecting children, both from an offender and a victim perspective. We have set up a specialized unit in the form of the Child Protection Unit since March 2015, and that unit carries out the responsibility of investigating matters relating to children. Since that time to now, that unit has been given as much staff as we can provide. At this point, we are building out additional members of staff for that unit, and we have submitted to the committee an extensive response to some of the questions that have been posed to us, and we are here today to add if there are any additional concerns and questions that the committee has. So I have available a small team of the persons who are the experts. I am just here as the head of the organization to facilitate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Representatives from the Child Welfare League.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Child Welfare League is a non-governmental organization, and we have preschools and nurseries. We have been functioning for the past 99 years. What we're doing presently, we are more focused on the teenage pregnancy, where we have the teenage mothers attend our daily exercises. We tutor them, and we tutor the girls in beauty culture. We give remedial academics so they can return to secondary school. Our main aim at the Choices program is to try to prevent a second pregnancy during their teenage age. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, we are going to commence the questioning. I'd like to remind members of the committee as well as officials to direct any questions you may have through the chair as we proceed in an orderly manner. If I may, I'd like to just open the questioning. In examining the submissions, the written submissions from the Ministry of Education, as well as from the TTPS, the Child Protection Unit, in 2014, the statistics given by the Ministry of Education indicate 99 cases of sexual abuse in both primary and secondary school, 99 combined for primary and secondary school. Based on the statistics given to us by the police service, there are two categories of offenses: sex with a female between the ages of 14 and 16, and sex with a female under the age of 14. And those both came up combined to 362 in the same year, 2014. So 99 cases of sexual abuse from the Ministry of Education with respect to primary and secondary, to 362 based on the police service statistics with respect to sex with a female between 14 and 16, right? Under 14 and up to 16. So every female, or most females in this country, in that age group are usually enrolled in school. If even we say that 25% of them are outside of school, then we are still down to 271 cases of sex with females under the age of 16, which should be classified as abuse. Now, if there are 271 and only 99 detected, according to the statistics by the Ministry of Education, that's, say, 37% detection of abuse in the schools. So I'm directing this question to both agencies. Is that a reasonable measure of what can be detected at this point in time of the abuse of children in schools? And just using that as an example, how is the detection rate of child abuse in schools? How is that done? How do you find out whether there is abuse going on? What is put in place to find that out? What percentage do you think you actually capture? And is there a direct relationship between what is detected by the police and what happens in the school? Is that information passed on in any way? And is there any kind of synergy going on there to be able to ensure that most of these cases of abuse are picked up?
Hi, good morning. Let me try to contextualize the data provided by the Ministry of Education. When the Student Support Services Division was set up, the approach used to deal with incidents of sexual abuse and pregnancy and child abuse in general, a case approach is utilized, and there are case files prepared for each case that an officer from the Student Support Services treat with. What has happened, and because of confidentiality issues, the system for aggregating the data is still a challenge for us. In other words, we have issues where there may be cases dealt by officers which may not have been aggregated. So there's an issue there, one with the data. That has been compounded also by the fact that both from the guidance and social work areas, we have a number of contract officers. And because of the numbers involved and the turnover and renewal of contracts, you have gaps in terms of personnel who are treating with cases. So that could account for some of the missing data. So that the figure we have presented, and based on our knowledge of what's taking place in the system, I think is understated. In addition to that, and we've recognized that there is a need for us, and we are working on, as part of our trust within the ministry, to put a monitoring and evaluation system in place, and therefore we are attempting to correct that in a systematic manner across the ministry. There are also instances where cases may be reported to the police service and which is not brought to our attention. You asked about the measures that we have in place in terms of detection, and there are several ways in which these cases, usually from teachers, deans, from staff within the school, when these are brought to our attention, a referral will be done to the Student Support Services Division, and then it becomes a case that they would follow up on. Or it could come to us directly from officers who are at the school, that is from the Student Support Services, whether it's guidance officers, or we may have reports by some students about a case that they are aware of. So there are multiple sources in which they come to our attention. There are also instances, and in some cases of pregnancy, where it manifests itself within the system as absenteeism. So you have a student who might be out of school for an extended period. Sometimes we have difficulty getting information or locating the student. And it may be that in some instances, these students go away, they have the baby, and they return, and it's not presented to us, in that way. So I really want to qualify the data by saying that we recognize within the ministry that there are a number of gaps that exist in terms of the data. We acknowledge that it is understated, and therefore it's one of the things that we are working towards correcting. In addition to that, we've made approaches, for example, to the Ministry of Health to collaborate in terms of, because pregnancy and child abuse very often is dealt with at the health institutions, so that some of these cases can be identified and follow-up action taken. And certainly there is a need for us to collaborate with the police service in terms of information. Now, we've put a system in place, particularly, for example, with sexual abuse, where there's a compulsory requirement for reporting so that cases brought to our attention are reported. But we have to collaborate with data. We also report to the Children's Authority, and maybe their data might be more comprehensive because they may get from multiple sources. So I just wanted to qualify the data we've provided, and with a certain degree of caution in terms of some of the gaps that exist and the need for us to liaise with other agencies in terms of getting a holistic picture and to collaborate so that we could more effectively deal with the issue.
Sorry, before the TTPS responds, this would tie in, what you just said about that collaboration would tie in very nicely, because a question has come to us from our online viewers asking if the ministry tracks areas where children who have been abused would most likely turn up. For example, the doctors and so on. So when you spoke about that collaboration with the Ministry of Health as well as the police service, that falls nicely into the answer to this kind of question. Because as you said, absenteeism from school may be what presents itself, and that in itself, I mean, the question may be asked about how that is dealt with, but then the child may be present in another institution and can be tracked if that collaborative method or approach is used to track the child. All right, could we get the response from the TTPS now? Thanks.
Honorable Chairman, the TTPS receives its reports from numerous sources. So whatever source brings a report to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, it is then recorded as one of report for investigation. So the numbers as reflected there will be reports brought to our attention from all the various sources that we are exposed to. So whether it is from the school, whether it is from parents, whether it is from guardians, whether it is from organizations such as NGOs, all those reports are reflected by way of our numbers.
And maybe I could ask this question very quickly. That information that is obtained, is it fed into any kind of database or fed directly to other interested parties, for example, the Children's Authority or the Ministry of Education? Is there a formal channel by which this information is disbursed?
When we receive a report, it is immediately sent to the Children's Authority. And internally, we have the CAPA unit that captures the data. But the reports we receive, it is sent to the Children's Authority.
Okay. If I could ask one quick question, again, coming from our online viewers. To the Children's Authority, what is the procedure to deal with parents where a child is abused with the knowledge of the parents, either by the parents or the parents know about and are aware of the abuse, but are not doing anything about this. What is the response of the Children's Authority to that situation?
At the Children's Authority, we have what we call a Child Protection Information Management System, where calls coming in from the public are channeled through the system, and we triage, we track the level of risk. What the system is able to do is to give us details of the report, and once we get the details, if there's some criminality attached, we liaise with the Child Protection Unit. The Child Protection Unit is responsible for the criminal investigation, and we focus on the child. If it is that through the report we determine that a parent was aware of the abuse, we ensure that we focus on the child, we ensure that the child is protected. In cases where the parent is aware of the abuse or involved in the abuse, there may be a situation where the child has to be placed with another relative or removed from the situation. If there's criminality involved, then the police service takes over and investigates the criminal side of the matter. So we really focus on the child, the rehabilitation, ensuring that the child is safe, but in terms of the criminal aspect, the police handle that.
Thank you. Senator Samuel.
Good morning again. According to the Guardian article on Thursday, 26th, of January 2017, the CPU quoted in the media that since its inception in May 2015, the CPU has so far investigated a total of 3,108 cases. But when we look at the data report submitted by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there seems to be a drastic difference between the figures quoted by the CPU. As a matter of fact, the Polish report indicates 2015-2016 as 877 reports of sexual offenses. I would like to ask what is the reason for the discrepancy in the statistics, because I have the newspaper clipping. Acting Superintendent Rodriguez, as well as Inspector Beverly Paul, were interviewed, and they stated the figures quoted, 3,108 cases, while the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service report, 2015 and 2016, has a cumulated amount of 877. So I would like to know why the drastic difference. And maybe, Chair, I could ask the second question that pertains to it one time. Could I do that?
Well, they seem to be discussing the first one, so let's let them do the first one, and then you can ask your second.
So there's a difference of 2,231, and I would like to find out, why were these cases not indicated in the submissions by the Police Service?
Good morning, everyone. I quoted the number, I gave statistics from the period May 2015 to December 2015. I gave a breakdown. I had 986 matters under investigation for that period. For the period 2016, that will be the first of January 2016 to the 31st of December, we had 2,122 matters under investigations. For the period, we quoted the whole period, that is from May 2015 to December 2016, we had 3,108 matters being investigated. Out of that, we had, for the year 2016, 591 matters being resolved.
That's what you said.
And we had, for the year 2015, that is from May to December 31st, 2015, we had 271 matters resolved. And we had 722 matters before the court from the inception of the unit to the 31st of December 2016. And the resolved matters would be matters that would have been brought to us, and we had no criminal cases or anything going to court with respect. We didn't identify any criminal offenses in those matters. Those are the matters that we resolved.
I understand what you're saying, but I have the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service report of sex offenses by type and gender. Appendix 1. And 2015, 565. The entire 2016, 312. That's accumulated to 877. Are we saying that the figures that you were using are different to the figures reported by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service? Because this is the appendix submitted. So I just wanted to find out why the drastic difference and what could have caused the drastic difference. It may be a mathematical problem. It may be some kind of reporting mechanism problem, but I'm not too sure.
No. We have a system, crime and problem analysis branch, which processes the data for the police service. With the advent of the new legislation, there are new offenses which are brought on board, and therefore the old classification has not taken up all the new offenses. What was presented, 3,108, is a total of all the offenses investigated, all the reports investigated by the police. So yes, there is some level of discrepancy with the appendix, but that was being generated by way of the arrangements not being worked out in relation to the classification through the electronic mechanism.
I'm still taken aback, Commissioner, because on the list out on Appendix 1, you have in 2015 some 13 or 14 sexual offenses, and in 2016 you have 11.
Perhaps what may assist, what are the new offenses that have not, or some examples of the new offenses in 2015 and 16 that would have been calculated in the figure given in the newspaper report that are not present here in the appendix?
You have offenses such as meeting after sexual grooming. For example, you have like sexual penetration. Before the new legislation, you had offenses like grievous sexual assault, serious indecency, buggery, and all those offenses were separate. However, with the new legislation, you have all been amalgamated, sexual into the offense of sexual penetration. These are some of according to the new legislation, that is how it is being classified. You have inciting a child in prostitution, exposing a child to a sexual act. There are a lot of new offenses, and we are liaising with the CAPA unit to have the new classifications. So that is why it would appear so, but we are working on it.
Are we then saying that the Child Protection Unit, which is under the purview of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, has a difficulty in submitting the kind of data to the police service so that their records can be up to date? Because this is what I'm hearing.
Well, I don't think it's that message we are sending. The listing that you have, that you possess at the appendix, it's classified as serious crimes by type.
You actually have one that says sex offenses by type, and it does include for 2015 and 16 some of the categories that you have spoken of. You see a difference between the information for 2009, where you had 9 offenses, right, 9 categories, and in 2015 it's a maximum of 14 now, which includes some of the maybe newer classifications that you have mentioned, but it still really begs the question. That dichotomy is very large, and one wonders what was left out of this appendix. Then what category of sexual offense is so large now that it's taking up 2,000 and something offenses as opposed to 8? Yeah. Yeah, it seems.
I want to ask a question, we should clarify, just when you finish.
We have the offense of sexual touching, sexual penetration.
Before we, okay, I think we are going to go around in circles because we do have some of these categories here. What I want to suggest is that we have not received a full report with respect to the sex offenses. I think that is clear, because if it has a difference of 2,000 and something, it means that there are a number of things that were not presented here, and therefore it throws some doubt on the accuracy of the information that has been presented to us, because some of those very categories are present, and even if they were not, it would mean that there's a very large category of sexual offense that we have not been privy to either. So in either case, whichever way you look at it, there has been a difficulty with the information presented to the committee. Mrs. Samuel, you want to continue?
Oh, I didn't answer.
Commissioner, you would like to respond?
We'll verify the numbers, and if necessary, I will resubmit the data with the updated and adjusted position. Clearly, there are some classification issues, and as I watch here, we have serious crimes, we have minor crimes, then there is a general report to the back which just spoke to offenses and listed offenses. So it's a classification issue and presentation issue. So I'll go through it and ensure that what is resubmitted is one submission in relation to offenses related to children. So the classification of serious, minor offense is not necessarily relevant.
Sorry, we also do have reports of sex offenses by type, gender, and division.
Yes.
You have that as well?
Yes.
Right, so this is really what I think we're probably referring to. But we can look forward to a resubmission of some information.
Could I just also comment that as Acting Superintendent Rodriguez would have reiterated in the statement in the Guardian, when she clearly looked at sexual offenses, 260 for periods, she was looking at a lot of sexual offenses in that article. So I think it's something needs to be clarified, and I agree to revisit the numbers and get it together again.
Just to indicate that offenses against children are not only sexual offenses. So what is quoted, if we quote sexual offenses and we look at that as all offenses against children, that's just one grouping. But we will resubmit and make it crystal clear the information in relation to children and child abuse.
Thank you so much. Senator, no, sorry, Mrs. Guiding Gopi Singh.
And thank you, Chair. As you know, children who are sexually abused, they will manifest certain emotional and psychological behavior in school. These children, when they present themselves in school, is it then that the ministry or whoever is in charge is not picking up these different behavior with the children, and perhaps that may be one of the reasons attributing for the disparity in the numbers? Because with a follow-up question from the chair, in 2015, the Ministry of Education reported only 275 cases, and we have the CPU of the TTPS saying 3,000 cases. We have a circular sent from the Ministry of Education mandating principals to report sexual cases or incidents where they have picked up children behaving in an abnormal way. So is there a disconnect between the CPU, the Ministry of Education, and the Children's Authority? Because what is happening? Because as I'm reading, we are seeing that we have so many programs in place to pick up these abnormalities in inverted commas, and still nothing is happening. Is it then now that you have to revisit your programs and see how to recharge and how best you could deal with this situation? Because, as I said, there was a mandate from the Ministry of Education telling principals you have to report it to the student support services and also to the school supervisors.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Clearly, as I indicated, the figures that we've submitted, we recognize that there is some understatement in terms of the cases, and even cases that might have been dealt with by officers within the ministry may not have come in the aggregation because of the process that has been used, where the emphasis was on confidentiality and filing information as opposed to aggregating it, which we are trying to correct. So there's some understatement in terms of the number of cases that we have been able to pull together. In terms of not recognizing instances where students might have been abused, what we have been doing through the student support services is mounting a number of training sessions for teachers to facilitate them identifying, and that's an ongoing process. Because of challenges with actual numbers, we have to prioritize. So if there's a case of abuse that is presented, that is given priority as opposed to a training session, so that you're right, there may be instances where we have cases which may present symptoms, but in some situations it may not have been picked up. And that is part of our process, part of what we are looking at in terms of improving the training of personnel at the school in addressing.
I believe Children's Authority wants to respond.
Children's Authority?
Yes, if I may, through you, Chair, I also wanted to indicate, I would have said in my opening statements that there is a critical need for us to finalize the National Protocol on Child Abuse. That document seeks to demarcate very clearly the responsibilities of the various entities that treat with children, and to understand where their responsibilities start and where they end, and how to treat with each other, so there is no duplication of resources, but however, there will be a network that will be able to greater capture all the children that may be in need of care and protection. So there has been a lot of work that has been done with all these agencies here today. However, there is need now to finalize those protocols and have agreements and MOUs to ensure that everybody is working with the same concept, working with the same protocols, and the processes that seamlessly interlink. So I think that is a critical component of this working seamlessly within the country.
Of those numbers, the 275, how many of those are children with special needs, children who are challenged? Because I believe 2 weeks ago there was some incident in the school for the blind where there was some untoward activities going on there. Do you have a number for those children who we will say most vulnerable or vulnerable?
Well, part of the intervention that the Student Support Services Division rollout will also bringing our special education personnel where needed. I don't have that data in front of me. We could look at it and probably give you some feedback on that. But as I said earlier, the figure that we've presented, we've recognized that there are some challenges in terms of cases that we have even treated but not brought forward in the data. And we may have to go back into our archives with individual records to do that. One of the things that we are doing, and we've recognized this, we've been working on it for a little while now, is that we have to also fix, and I agree with the Children Authority in terms of agencies working together, because there may be instances that may not present or we need to, or we can assist with, but it's not brought to our attention. But one of the things we have to do in the ministry is to fix our data collection system, our monitoring and evaluation system, so that even within the ministry, we are clear in terms of all cases. We've had increase in reporting, but we have to be clear that all cases that are presented are actually recorded, and we have that big picture.
Mrs. Jennings-Smith.
My question is directed to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education. I noted that the primary schools, the number of sex abuse cases in the primary schools were higher than the secondary school. I want to ask you if there are any counselors at primary schools for that purpose.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
We
We have-
respond every instance then that is brought to our attention, whether it's primary or secondary. We prioritize and we treat those.
With respect to reports that are received, we would have officers that are assigned immediately once we have the instances. Once the information is brought to the Ministry of Education, we would dispatch, in many instances, we dispatch a team of persons who get out, who go out into the schools. So it is available.
Are you satisfied with that arrangement? Because you're looking at, in your own quotation, you spoke about having that environment to detect.
Yes.
So are you satisfied with that arrangement?
No. Let me answer. Okay, I would answer it first, and then the CEO would, at least where areas I've left out, the Chief Education Officer will add. But in looking at it, I've always wondered why it is that we are not providing, as you would say, a citizen-centered service as opposed to a case. In meeting with the Student Support Services, I had remarked the fact that it is time for us to move away from merely providing this. It seems that we react, and we need to begin, as you said, the detection, early detection, meaning that we have analyzed the information at the school, within the context, but that we build a system that responds, that understands what is happening and responds. So in a meeting, we have decided that we need to relook, we need to develop actually what you call a citizen-centered service, as opposed to our customer relations or customer service that we provide in terms of cases where we wait for an incident to occur and then we react. So in the ministry, we have begun the discussion towards that. But in terms of the numbers, what was said to me is in light of the number of incidents, then it means that the system, we have to roll out with a different structure entirely in terms of ensuring that the data, the information is collected, because again, it will be qualitative data and analyzed, but that we have the person to respond. The numbers are really small. CEO, you can add at this point.
Yeah, just 2 quick points. The first one is any incident that is brought to our attention, whether it's at the primary or secondary school, we prioritize and there's an immediate response. However, in terms of the question asked about numbers, and we did indicate that there are some concerns with the numbers and the ratios. Currently, we have the Student Support Services Division organized. We have the guidance, we have special ed, social work, and we also have a diagnostic assessment and intervention unit, which is a small number of clinical and behavioral persons who treat with it. At the secondary level, we run a ratio of approximately 1 guidance officer to 1 school. At the primary level, it's about 1 to 5 for guidance and or social work, both at the primary and secondary, 1 to 5 for social work. So that since our program involves both a proactive and a responsive approach, when we have to respond, often it mitigates the effort on the proactive side. In other words, because we prioritize incidents that occur for immediate intervention. So the simple answer to your question is, while we do address on a priority basis all incidents that take place and is brought to our attention, in terms of the effectiveness of the program, the number ratios, mitigates against that effective part of the strategy. Now, we've put some structures in place to facilitate. For example, at the district, we have a multidisciplinary team because while we are speaking here about sexual abuse and child abuse generally, there are a number of other areas that the unit deals with, so that it falls within the overarching program, and therefore the issue of contracts and renewal and the timeliness of that also creates some problem for us in terms of ensuring that the staffing ratios meet all the needs that we have.
I want to ask 2 questions. I'm going to ask them one after the next. The first question is simply, why are we so understaffed with respect to the guidance counselors and so on? Social sciences and social work always seems to be very oversubscribed at our tertiary institutions, and yet still we always hear of the understaffing. Is there a need at this point to make a special call or a special emphasis on getting people into this area, or this critical area of service to the country? And there are different ways of doing that kind of thing, but in your opinion, is there a need at this point? And this also goes to the TTPS. People involved in this critical kind of social service, is there a need to make a special call for citizens to get into that area? That's my first question. And the second question is, based on the information available, the statistics available to us from the police service as well as the Ministry of Education, it seems that while sexual offenses seem to be going down, and I'm saying this based on the information which we already discussed may have its challenges, it seems as though sexual offenses overall seem to be going down, but within the schools it seems to be going up. And I mean, there's a question here with respect to, is it because we are detecting it better now, or is it because it is simply occurring more now? So 2 questions, one dealing with the understaffing issue. Is there an urgent need at this point for a concentration and a focus into getting people into the social service area to boost the number of guidance officers and so on? And the second question is it an actual thing that we are experiencing based on the data we have? Sexual offenses going down countrywide or nationwide, but sexual offenses in schools going up. And what could be the cause of that very disturbing trend that seems to be presenting itself?
Okay, Chair, I will answer the second question first. Within the last 2 years, we've taken a number of steps, not just the circulars, but in terms of interaction with principals and supervisors, in terms of making it compulsory for reporting, so that we believe that some of the increases that we are seeing has really to do with the reporting as opposed to an actual increase. But as I said, my initial statement in terms of the data concerns and being a person who works with data, unless we get the true picture and the total data, it might be difficult to say. But we believe that we've had an increase in reporting of incidents, so that our data might show a trend going up. And it's not just, we're seeing that not just for sexual offenses. I think is incidents of indiscipline where schools are required to report immediately. So that's the trend that we are seeing. In terms of whether we need to direct persons into the different areas of study, I think it's twofold. One is, and within the ministry, we've been looking at it, given the size of the institution and the number of persons, our HR department deals with more than 10,000 teachers, staffing. So in student support services alone, we have more than 500 persons, a number of them on contracts. We have in schools the IT technicians who are contract. We have the business operation assistants who are contract positions. And I think part of the challenge we have experienced, or we are experiencing with the ministry, is the challenge for HR to manage that whole recruitment and filling of vacancies process. So I think that's part of it, because there are positions on the establishment of positions that we have available that sometimes takes an inordinate amount of time to fill, and that's one of the areas we are attempting to address. There are some areas where there may be a deficit in terms of persons available. My colleague at the guidance officer might be able to identify some of those, but I think for us, if we can get all the positions that are available filled first, and I'm talking about persons who may have a contract would have come to an end, and sometimes there's a delay in the renewal process. If we can have that system working properly, then it puts us in a good footing for the next step, where we can then make a proper analysis in terms of how much more we need.
Certainly, go ahead.
Yes. As we look at the education system, it's a microcosm of the wider society. And over the years, as a permanent secretary and having worked in the education system for quite a number of years, you recognize that we are responding. What is happening in our wider society is impacting in our schools. It is, and therefore, the reaction has been that if it is for security, the Ministry of Education is responsible. If it is for, as we said, student support services, the Ministry of Education responds. We are seeing the social ills, we're seeing it in our schools. And we have increased the number of guidance officers, number of school social workers. We are increasing. But I think what we need to do is it has to be a general response at the national level that allows our children, because at the end of the day, you recognize that the metrics, the outcomes of our students are affected because the Ministry of Education the focus is shifting away from really educating to becoming school social workers, guidance officers. So there must be, as we're sitting here, there must be a national response that supports our education system. Because most of what we are seeing, even the incidents, it's in our homes, it's in our communities, but it impacts the students that are in our schools. So even as you ask the question, how can we, in terms of understaffing, if you increase the numbers, if we continue to increase the number of school social workers, it means that the Ministry of Education we'd have to put another system in place to be able to manage what is now the Student Support Services Division. Because that in itself, 500 persons, and if you're looking at thousands of persons out there in the system, the management of that, it will speak to a new type of structure, right? Thank you.
Senator Samuel. Sorry, Senator Samuel, just before you answer, the TTPS wanted to respond. In your response, if I could just ask, I know the figures, we had a challenge with that. And I was really asking, is it that sexual offenses are going down? Maybe you can give us some insight on that. The figures that we have before us seem to suggest that. So if that is true, and then I think the Children's Authority also wants to respond on these 2 points. And then we take Senator Samuel's question.
The Child Protection Unit, the TTPS, has embarked on an awareness program together with the other arm, which is the Community Policing Unit. And persons are being sensitized. They are more aware now of the legislation, the offenses, because we have been going into schools and other places. We sometimes collaborate with the Ministry of Education, also the Ministry of Health, and the National Family Services. We have been having outreach programs in like village councils and churches, and we are on that awareness program, and people, because of the services they are now aware of, they are coming in and making reports to the police, and we are getting these number of reports coming in. They are now more aware of themselves, so I believe because of that, the awareness that they now have, right, they would be, what I should say, they are more protective of themselves and so on. So that is why you might see the appearance of the reports going down, because we start from preschool, so at that age, children are being more aware of offenses and how to protect themselves.
So you are confirming that sexual offenses are going down?
Yes, because, you know, the awareness now that is taking place, yes.
Okay. So we look forward when we get the resubmission to the full picture on it. It does seem so, but we know there was a little challenge with the information that we have. Okay. Children's Authority?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. We also wanted to add to the discussions, firstly, concerning your question on staffing. We believe that there is a need for additional professionals in this field for two major reasons. One, to provide long-term intervention services to children that are found to experience trauma. Many times the interventions require a long-term provision of services. So while there may be detection, there may be initial de-escalation of the situation, there is a requirement for long-term intervention to restore normal functioning. And secondly, to embark on a coordinated prevention strategy, which require persons to go into communities and to the homes to provide mechanisms and tools to allow children to protect themselves and families to protect their children. So besides the detection and the initial response to a report, there is a need for long-term intervention, and I believe as well as prevention strategies. With regard to the question on the sexual abuse and whether it is in fact declining, no, the Children's Authority has a central repository of data through our Child Protection Information Management System. And what we have seen since proclamation to now is that consistently, sexual abuse has been the highest category of abuses against children. As a matter of fact, it accounts for generally about a quarter of the reports. Now, while the number of reports received, it's increasing at a slower rate, the percentage that is sexual abuse holds its position. So at any given point in time, generally, sexual abuse accounts for 20 to 25% of all the reports that the authority has received. So from our standpoint, we have not necessarily seen a decline in reports on child abuse, sexual abuse against children. We are seeing that the percentage, the proportion of abuse cases for when it comes to sexual abuse has maintained its position. And we believe that it's a two-prong also. One, there is more reporting. Persons feel more confident to report. There are more mechanisms. Persons can report through the police. The police would advise the authority. The persons can report to the authority. The authority then advise the police. And also there is a mechanism with Social Support Services Division and the authority as well. And also, we suspect, as we look at the data and we look at the nature of the cases, that there are more children venturing into sexual activities, either coerced or by consent, as we put it in quotation. So we are not seeing the decline, but we want to say that what our statistics are showing is that there is a consistent amount of reports with regard to sexual abuse.
Senator Samuel, just before you come in, I am just noting that I'm hearing from the police service that there is a decline in sexual offenses. But with respect to children, the data from Ministry of Education does indicate that it's increasing, and that may be understated data. The Children's Authority has indicated they are not seeing that decrease with respect to children on children's sexual offenses either. If I could just quickly ask the Child Welfare League to be brought into discussion as you deal with teenage pregnancy, which is also an indicator of abuse in many cases because these are underage children. Are you seeing any decrease in the number of pregnancies? And I know there may be various reasons, but what's your immediate response to the trend of child sexual abuse based on your experience? Is it increasing or are you seeing a decrease?
With the adolescent mothers, it is increasing in some areas and decreasing in some. Where we have the...
when you say areas, do you mean geographic areas?
Geographic areas.
And where would you see that increase?
In the Southwestern Division, but we do not have any centers down there. In the Eastern region, in the Northeastern region, it is decreasing.
So that would kind of correspond, if you say urban, rural, would we say that it's generally increasing in the rural areas but decreasing in urban areas?
Yes, I would say that. You see, what is happening, we do not have any programs in the Southwestern area. We only have, I would say, in the East-West corridor, we have programs.
So generally, we're seeing that kind of an increase, if we can say, in child sexual abuse.
Yes,
and we're getting that from the three agencies.
What is happening is that the girls, it's a lot of younger girls are getting involved in sexual acts. What we get is like 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who are pregnant. Right now, the eldest is about 15. That is what we are seeing. But it's not all the cases that comes to us.
Okay, so we're going to take Senator Samuel now, and I hope I get some time to speak to Children's Authority on the Romeo clause, but we'll see how that comes after. Senator Samuel.
Chair, you sort of took the words out of my mouth when it came to teenage pregnancies, because this question is to the Toronto Bigger Police Service with regards to charges. If you have so much teenage pregnancies, why aren't we seeing the police service, the incidences of charges against people who perpetrate in this manner as high as? It is said that you have about 2,500 teenage pregnancies on an annual basis That has been purported in the media and stuff like that, but we are not hearing of that amount of cases against fathers. And someone said to me, well, the children are no longer putting the name of the father on the birth certificate, but then probably you need to cooperate with the Ministry of Education and find out which father's coming to school to pick up the children. And if you ask the children, who is daddy, then the daddy might be found out in a smart way. That's one question to the TTPS. But according to the annual report of the Children's Authority, 2015 and 2016, I recognize a trend with reported persons responsible for abuse. And mothers are high. 34.5% reported responsible for abuse are mothers. Unknown, I'm kind of worried about the unknown category because if it's reported, is it that the child is not saying who is abusing them? And then I see fathers at 17%, and then it goes down after that. And the third question is to the Child Protection Unit. The third question is to the Child Protection Unit. I recognize that there were some areas of concern. And when it comes to the cases reported and those valid cases that were being investigated, and one of the concerns was that in the areas, there are areas that are high. Sawa, Laventil, Tunapuna, Piarco had the highest overall reported cases of sexual abuse. They had 195, as opposed to Tunapuna, Piarco, 145, and Kuva, Kabaki, Talparo, 108. Are there specialized programs targeted for areas where these reported cases are high to significantly work within those communities to reduce it? I recognize that when it comes to physical abuse, the same areas fall victim to that. Sawa, Laventil, 126, Tunapuna, Piarco, 124, Kuva, Tabaki, Talparo, 17. So what we are seeing in your concerns is that there are specific areas that the incidences seem to be very prevalent. And if they are prevalent, what programs are you designing or have you designed to get into these communities, these areas, these schools, these whatever, to now deal with it? Because general things don't work in specific things, and one cap doesn't fit all. So it means that if your reports are stating that these are high reports, then they should be targeted. The community should be targeted. The area should be targeted. And I would like to know, what programs have you invested in for such communities where you have these high reports of both sexual abuse and physical abuse? And what are the outcomes of these programs, and what would the measuring sticks use to now determine if they are successful or not? So that was 3 questions, ma'am.
Could you remind us who the first was to, Mr.
Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with regards to those people that are charged with regards to the purported 2,500 teenagers who are pregnant annually.
All right, so let's deal with that one specifically.
Well, Marcia.
Yeah. Yes, so I'll deal with the charges as against the teenage pregnancy. I am not too familiar with the 2,500 figure, but what we do, sir, as long as we get a report involving a teenager relative to pregnancy, we carry out a thorough investigation, and at the end of that investigation, if there is evidence to prosecute anybody relative to an offense committed, we do it. But we must have the support of the victim, who will be the mother. We must have her support where statements are concerned in order to take the matter before the court. We must.
Do you usually get that support?
Very rare. Very rare.
And that may be the answer as
Yes,
to why we don't see. And I just want to ask a quick follow-up there. How many, in cases of teenage pregnancy, how many, and related to this whole Romeo clause, how many children are being impregnated by children? Is that a common trend, or is it really that you're seeing more of the older men impregnating the women? Is it more prevalent now that you're seeing that kind of closeness in age in terms of teenagers being impregnated?
Go ahead.
Yes, there are a number of cases with the involving the Romeo clause, and there are challenges with that with respect to Section 20 of the Children's Act, the decriminalization of sexual activities between children. And those, you have those three categories, the 2 years apart and the 3 years apart. There is a challenge. Reports would come, and there is a situation with medical personnel. We have some cases where we would request medicals, and we are being told that the doctors could face litigation because no offense is committed. However, there are 4 conditions to be satisfied, and if it should not be actually so, because part of our procedure to carry forward the investigation, a medical must be done. So when sometimes you go and once it is said that you have teenagers like 2 years apart or 3 years apart according to the category under which they fall, we are getting a stumbling block there. But the investigations will determine if any charges can be pursued, because if it is the 2 persons are of the same sex, they are in a familial relationship like incest, and so we have to proceed with criminal charges. But there is a challenge there with having medicals done, but we have a number of reports with close in age, the Romeo clause, but we have been facing challenges, because after you conduct an investigation, that is when you would determine the course which would be taken, whether charges are laid, and if those 4 conditions are not satisfied, obviously charges would be laid. But part of our procedure is that a medical be done, and we are experiencing challenges with that.
Really quickly, Child Welfare League, you'll deal with specifically with pregnancy in teenage girls. Are you also seeing a trend, or more of a trend now, where teenagers are the fathers of the children?
No, it's mostly men over 25, you'll find that, and also stepfathers.
Okay. Senator Samuel, to your
Chair,
second question.
Therefore, the statement from the last speaker agrees with the Honorable Attorney General, because on June 1st, 2016, the Attorney General in a meeting at his office said that between 2008 and 2015, a total of 35 girls under 12 became pregnant by adult men, and 2,654 girls between 13 and 16 were also made pregnant by adult men. He clarified emphatically that 81 girls between the ages of 13 and 16 became pregnant. Their pregnancies were terminated between 2011 and 2015, and 683 girls, 17 to 19, terminated their pregnancies over the same period. So what I'm hearing from the last speaker seems to collaborate with the Attorney General, and it means that there seems to be information that's available. I think we need to access the information that's available make sure that we are on the right road, because of the information I gathered from the Attorney General, and what we are hearing today collaborates with that. So I just wanted to let them know that. So the second question was to the Children's Authority with regards to the persons responsible for abuse, and that why do you feel, I mean, we know we are in an age of single mothers and single homes with mothers, but what could be done to significantly reduce the 34% of mothers that are abusing their children? And then I want to know the unknown clause.
All right, well, thank you for your question. With regard to mothers being identified by the reporter as the alleged perpetrator, what we have found is that mothers who feel frustrated and feel alone without support mechanisms, they are the ones who tend to perpetrate the abuse of neglect. That is what we're seeing as the highest category perpetrated by mothers, and at times physical abuse. And it's really because they lack support systems to aid them in raising their children. That's really what we are seeing as the cause. And so really it is a national response to provide that support mechanisms to families. Because while you have the single mothers, when you think single parent, you usually think mothers, but their fathers as well. But it's really the support mechanisms for a family. And the unknown category really has to do with when someone makes a report to the Children's Authority, at times they may not know who the perpetrator is, but they recognize that a child is in despair and they have contacted us. When we have investigated the report and we identify the perpetrator, then the category is changed to whomever we identify them to be. So that unknown category may be those reports that we have not yet investigated, where we have not yet, or we have investigated, have not yet identified the perpetrator.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Ahmed, your third question.
The third question is to the CPU. Because you have areas of concern, geographical areas of concern, where there's municipality or borough, you have high incidences in specific areas. You have the Sawa, Lavantel, Tunopuno Piako, Kuva, Tabaki, Talparo, in both its instances of physical abuse and sexual abuse as the highest reported thus far. You are very concerned. I want to know what specific programs, what programs that you have designed to now get into these areas and begin to now spread your wings and try to curb on the incidences, and then use that as a sort of pilot projects to now work in other areas in the future if they too arise.
So we have embarked on a sensitization drive. What we do, we work in collaboration with the community police officers. We go to schools, preschools, primary schools, secondary schools. We even have the caravan where we have, we distribute flyers and give information booklets to the people, the persons in attendance. And we also go further by attending, have our officers attend the station council meetings, which are kept in the various districts with the different stakeholders. And we also have our officers attend the town meetings and have them sensitize the public about the various offenses.
Specific, or are those generalized programs that you embark upon across the region? But I want to know if there, for instance, if you go to the doctor with a specific problem, and he deals with a specific problem in a special way, and not from a generalized standpoint. Seeing that you have picked up that there are areas, there are municipalities that have high incidences of sexual abuse as well as physical abuse, I want to suggest that you look into these areas and design specific programs to now get into these areas and then keep the data and all of the statistics so that you can utilize the data and the statistics in future if something else happens in another particular area. So that's my suggestion to you.
Yeah, we do note your recommendation, Senator Samuel.
Minister Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want you to allow me some latitude here. I want to refer to the incident that was reported in the paper about a child, a Standard 1 pupil, being bullied and suffering a broken arm and other injuries. To the Ministry of Education, do you agree that the Ministry of Education can be vicariously liable for that abuse, that bullying perpetrated on that child? And I'm asking that because it is reported that the parent made complaints and nothing was done, no response. So is it that the Ministry of Education can be vicariously liable before the courts? And has the Ministry of Education been brought before the courts on account of being vicariously liable? That is the first question. And the second question is social media. We've seen a number of videos where teachers rough up and physically beat students, unruly students or otherwise. What is the rate of these reports where teachers physically abuse children? What is done about it? And has the Ministry of Education been brought before the courts on account of that physical abuse?
The answer to your first question is yes. In fact, the Education Act ascribes responsibility for the safety of students to principals in secondary schools, and by extension, it becomes the responsibility of the ministry. I'm not aware of instances where we've been brought before the courts. What I can tell you, however, there are instances where students may have been injured in school, and through our insurance, the ministry would have paid compensation in that regard. With respect to acts by teachers on students, what I have at the current time I can give you, and this is specific to disciplinary matters and not specific student-teacher issues. We have about 117 matters involving teachers that are before the Teaching Service Commission. And from that, because I was preparing for this, I looked at the number of sexual abuse cases, and we have 19 from that 117, ranging from touching, sexting, hugging, and sexual intercourse with students. So we have 19, and these are currently before the Commission. In terms of the procedure that the ministry has in place for dealing with errant teachers, there is a disciplinary process that we have, and I'm going to talk generally first. So any incident where there is misconduct on the part of the teacher, and it doesn't necessarily mean teacher-student, any incident which is considered as misconduct, the process is that there is an investigation, and then that matter is brought before the Teaching Service Commission, who will then decide on the process for disciplinary action. In instances where the offense might be or put students in danger, so like in the instances of sexual misconduct, there's arrangement between the ministry and the Teaching Service Commission where a report is sent within 24 hours, and it may result in a cease reporting issue from the Commission pending the determination of that. In instances where we determine that we can't wait 24 hours, those teachers are asked to report to the district, so we take them out immediately from the system, but there's a clearly defined disciplinary process, and that doesn't prevent or exclude if it's a criminal matter that the police do their own investigation and they go through the process.
Lastly, what about instances of emotional, mental abuse in terms of teachers picking on children, putting them to the back of the class, putting them out of the class, refusing to teach them, that sort of thing? Have you received such reports?
There would have been reports, and as I indicated, once they come to our attention, we do an investigation. In terms of how it is addressed, it is addressed twofold. Once there are instances where students are abused, student support services personnel at the secondary level, we have a guidance officer basically attached to the school. They will intervene and basically advocate for the child and maybe mount counseling session or whatever is required to treat with that. In the instance where, and we're dealing now with the teacher, if the investigation reveals that there is misconduct on the part of the teacher, the disciplinary process is instituted, and depending on the recommendation from the investigating officer, it can then go forward to the Teaching Service Commission recommending disciplinary action.
Lastly, do you agree that absentee teachers affect the rights of a child and can be deemed abuse?
You're asking me to do an interpretation, and I'm not a legal person, but it's an area that the ministry considers critical. We've instituted a number of things to deal with the issue of absenteeism and also irregularity and punctuality of teachers. We've done a number. Part of the challenge we've had in dealing with that had to do, there's the procedural discipline process that the ministry uses. It means before a teacher can be charged, we have to go through the process of speaking, counseling, writing. And if that process is not followed through, often when it gets to taking action against the teacher, the case falls down. So we've done a series of training sessions with principals in terms of instituting the disciplinary process to ensure that when it comes to taking action, the matter can go forward. We are still having challenges because there are some principals who are hesitant to go all the way. They may write, do the initial warning letter and the counseling, but to take it all the way sometimes that is a challenge. So we've done some training. We've also provided, part of it is the writing process that needs to be followed. Some of our principals are not aware of the regulations, they need to quote and all of that. So we've actually done templates where principals can utilize and follow through the process. So it's an area of concern that we have. In fact, and I can just add, one of the areas we've been addressing in a serious way for the last year or two is the issue of indiscipline in schools. And for example, teachers who are not present in a classroom at the beginning of the day, sometimes you may have incidents. So part of our strategy involves clear guidelines for supervision of students, not just in classrooms and during class, but also arrangements utilizing deans, safety, security officers on the school compound. And you would have noticed within recent times, some of the incidents that are coming forward now are actually taking place outside of the school environment.
I want to ask a question that deals with the second part of the objectives, which is determining the adequacy of legislation in protecting children from abuse. And I'm asking this in the context of the Romeo Clause. What is done? And how is this clause, how does it make life difficult, or how do you treat with it in the context of a school environment, say, or a primary school environment where you have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old engaging in sexual activity that is, based on the legislation, not considered abusive? How is this dealt with in the schools? I would like to hear the views of maybe all the representatives here on whether or not the Romeo Clause constitutes an inadequacy in the legislation, or has it presented any type of problem with respect to children and their interactions within the school context and in general?
Ask our guidance officer to respond since she's intimately involved in the process.
Good evening, panel. Within the school environment, the Romeo Clause can be seen both in primary and secondary school. We have to recognize that experimentation and sexual curiosity, while we may frown upon it, it is deemed as normal, right? And we have to also be aware that our culture and the world is changing. The children have access and more exposure to a lot of sexual activities and pornography, even by the cell phones that we may casually hand a 3-year-old or 4-year-old to play with and use, and they click a button and a cookie comes up and they're seeing porn. So what we have seen happening several times is children, even in infants' classes, can experiment. And when we do and go in and investigate, it is simply because last night, when we found out and we go in, some parents still allow 5-year-old and 6-year-old children to sleep in bedrooms and in their beds. When they think they're sleeping, they are not. So therefore, when I come to school the next day, I want to act out what I saw happen at home. Children get up during the night, all right, and you walk into the living room and big brother, uncle, granny, auntie, somebody is watching some form of pornographic material, and therefore I come in school and I want to act it out. So that they themselves may not be actual victims of abuse at home, but you are seeing it, and the continuous exposure is also making me want to perform and act out. So that the Romeo Clause helps to protect sometimes innocent experimentation that may be taking place, but it is something that we have to also be vigilant and in ensuring that it is not being abused under the cover of that protection. Thank you.
If it is at all determined that there is something untoward going on and the ages of the children fall within that category, is there anything that can be done? And this is probably to the Police Service and Insurance Authority. What can be done?
In the settings of the Romeo Clause, there are certain conditions, and if these conditions exist, something can be done, because if it is proven, evidence is had, where the child has been forced or coerced or exploited or has been groomed, and in the grooming it doesn't necessarily mean the child itself, but it could be a parent or guardian or somebody who has control of that child, right? And the person, you know, is exploiting that person to gain the trust in order to engage in some activity with the child. If it is the persons are of the same sex or in a familial relationship, like if it's two brothers or something, incest is still an offense, and that age difference. If these conditions exist, then the can prosecute, because inside there are offenses, you know, same sex and all that exists, so something can be done. But I believe in some cases that, you know, because of this, I would put it maybe across like a sort of inadequacy that in the law that, you know, this sometimes is exploited just as, you know, the young people are experimenting, they are using this. But, you know,
As
once
a
the
loophole,
conditions...
it is possible to use as a loophole then?
Yes.
Children Authority, you want to make a comment on this?
Well, just to add to what Inspector Paul is saying, there are 4 conditions that must be satisfied. The age gap, which could be 2 or 3 years in some cases. They must not be in a familial relationship, not be of the same sex, but very importantly also do not reveal any element of exploitation, coercion, threat, deception, grooming, or manipulation in that relationship. And so, when a report is received, besides those other factors existing, it is important that as the police carries out its investigation, that it will attempt to determine whether any of these other elements exist, which may be sometimes pretty difficult.
Subjective, exactly.
Yeah, very difficult to uncover. But this really is the context within which it was framed. Yeah.
It's important to note as well that the age of criminal responsibility with regard to sexual crimes is 12 years old. So the Romeo clauses do not debar children, kids who are 12 years old, from facing prosecution if it is found that they have coerced or, you know, if they've been involved, if they've perpetrated a sexual crime. That's important to note as well. We have had situations where children have perpetrated against other children, even though they fall within the close-in age, and we've worked with the police to investigate those cases. And we've also worked within the authority to rehabilitate, to counsel, and to help those children, because very often children who perpetrate against other children have faced some sort of abuse themselves. We really have, we've seen that we've seen that evidence very clearly.
All right. Mrs. Guiding Gopising.
Thank you. The question is for the Children's Authority and Ministry of Education. And does the ministry track cases of abuse in denominational schools? And what's the follow-up process or the monitoring of these abused children? And to the Children's Authority, do you all track cases of abuse in orphanages? I would also like to ask one question to the Child Welfare League. With those teenage girls, how many of those return with a second and third pregnancy?
So we'll address the first question first, that goes to
Yes,
the...
the first one is to the Ministry of Education.
Ministry of Education.
If the ministry track cases of abuse in all schools, including denominational schools.
The answer is yes. We, all public schools, we follow up at both denominational and government schools. As to the follow-up process, I'll ask our guidance officer to respond.
Our follow-up process will be in conjunction in adherence to the legislation, mandatory reporting, and it's also based on the severity of the issue and the offense committed, so that our social workers will be the first line of intervention once detected and reported and referred from, and cases handed over from guidance. And once it's handed over to social work, they will start to do the home visits, the necessary reportings, counseling with the child. If it is that it requires further intervention and follow-up, we will then pass it on to either our psychologists and or behavioral specialists for further intervention and support for that child. And again, it also a question of the nature of the abuse and what exactly may have happened, be it pregnancy, etc. Then a further intervention would be required based on the nature of the abuse and presented issues.
Okay. Mrs. Guiding Gopising, your second question.
Yes, we do. Not very often, but when we do get reports of children that reside in community residences, previously called orphanages, we do track them just as any other report of child abuse. And they come from really two strands. There may be a child who may have been specifically abused who reside at a community residence, or there may be abusive behavior by a staff and management of community residences that put children at risk. So from the two ends, we do track and investigate, and we will protect the children as we would do any other child.
Your third question to the Child Welfare League.
Although I know you're saying you're trying to protect those teenage girls having a second pregnancy or a third. So how many of those come back perhaps with a second and third?
No. Our program only allows the girls to attend with one pregnancy. But we do some follow-up. And those follow-up, the second pregnancy, all we can do for them is counseling because our program only allows one pregnancy. And just about 2% you will find have a second pregnancy. We, however, are reviewing if we can take a girl with a second pregnancy, but it is not within our program, since it is an intervention for one pregnancy only.
And 2% represent how many girls?
Just about 3 girls, 2 or 3 girls.
We are going to take our last question from Minister Moses.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. In the setting of the school, this is directed to the Ministry of Education. In the setting of the school, do you have any sense of how often the teacher could become a victim of the child's abuse, or whether any threats or might have been directed at the teacher?
I wouldn't be able to quantify. We have instances where teachers are threatened by students. They would be collected in our data as incidents of indiscipline. We do collect all incidents of indiscipline in schools, and we have categories. So it will be collected there. We will have to go in and disaggregate to get that. But we do have instances of threats to teachers by students.
Even outside the framework of the school relative to the threats, meaning the abuser might have been without the school system?
And this is by teachers we are looking at outside of the school system?
No, the abuser outside of the school system and directed at the teacher within the school system.
So parents or guardians who may have abused the child now are making advances towards the teacher in a negative way.
I am not aware. I'll ask Ms. Smith to respond, but I am not aware of such instances.
Abuse and dysfunctional and deviant behavior can emanate forth from anywhere, and there will be instances where parents may be angry or feel some level of injustice, may have been meted out at different points in time. We, student support services, will seldom track parents being angry or meting out any acts of violence on teachers. That will not be our remit, because our focus will always be on students. So I don't know if Mr. Director.
All right, so that was our last question.
May I just add one thing, though?
Sorry.
We do have a program with Parenting in Education, whereby we do several programs and activities with parents within the schools and within the communities to address and help teach them various skill sets that we believe is also important in helping them move forward and to work in a positive manner in nurturing their own children. So those programs would help us.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was our last question. Our very last question is going to come from Senator Samuel.
Ministry of Education, on Wednesday, 25th January, on CNC 3, there was a discussion about allegations of abuse at schools for the blind. I'm not too sure if you are aware of the allegations, and the question is, what sort of checks and balances has the ministry put in place or have in place to scrutinize the operations of these institutions and from a preventative mechanism? And if I may add a question to that, to the police service, in your report, there is a category called serious indecency. I would really like that to be explained so that the national public could understand what serious indecency is all about. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you your first one?
The School for the Blind. The actual operation of the school is under the purview of the Ministry of Education, but the facilities, the building is owned by the Blind Welfare Association. The reports that are emanating really arise from, I would say, a conflict between the association and the Ministry of Education personnel in terms of the operation of the school. Now, the ministry would have spent a tremendous amount of funds in refurbishing the school within recent times. Previously, there would have been accommodation for students attending the school to stay over, and there was a service provided by the Blind Welfare Association. However, based on reports we've had, we have opted, that is the Ministry of Education, to provide transport to and from the school to students. So currently there isn't that overnight facilities. And therefore, currently our system for supervision of the school falls under the Director of School Supervision, where we monitor the operation of the school. But what is emanating in terms of a conflict is not a student-teacher conflict, was really one between the administration, the principal, and the association. And in fact, even today we had to intervene because the association is asking to be ascribed denominational status and what goes with that. They are attempting to reinstitute the overnighting facilities where currently we don't have any students accessing it. So in terms of the operation of the school, with respect to school personnel and students, there aren't any issues. We are, in fact, currently in the ministry looking at how we best resolve that situation and whether it is in the best interest of the students to continue occupying that facility or we look at other facilities.
And the last response from the police service based on the question of the definition of serious indecency.
An act of serious indecency is an act other than sexual intercourse, whether natural or unnatural, by a person involving the use of the genital organ for the purpose of arousing or gratifying sexual desire. That's the definition we have here.
On that note, I would like to invite the representatives from each of the organizations to give a brief closing comment. We've spoken a lot, we've dealt with a lot, we've looked at a lot. And bearing in mind that what we've been considering would have been the adequacy of programs and services for detection, reduction, and treatment of child abuse and teenage pregnancy, and to determine the adequacy of legislation in protecting children from abuse. So I now invite the representatives to make brief closing comments based on our discussions here today. We can start with Children's Authority, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. The Children's Authority, as far as we see it, has a significant role in streamlining and assist with providing a coordinated response to child abuse in the country. With being operational just over 20 months, or just about 20 months now, what we have accumulated over that time was not only data, but experience that would provide us with critical information to help shape how we go forward. So what we are doing right now is a strategic review, really evaluating where we are and what those experiences have taught us. Coming out of that, what we are seeking to do is to develop a prevention strategy, because while we treat with the reports of abuse, we understand that there is a critical need for prevention strategies, a targeted response based on empirical evidence. That is very, very important for the nation. And so we are hoping that within 3 to 5 years, we ought to see a reduction in child abuse. Our key performance indicators as an organization within our units will also follow that pattern so that we can really track and measure that we are in fact accomplishing what we have set out to do. So the authority as a whole, we believe that we are well poised to really make an impact on the nation as it grows. And also we see the authority as part of the future crime initiative, crime fighting initiative. If it is we treat with child abuse now, it will have a positive impact on the reduction in crime in the future. We really believe that we are positioned to make that impact. And so we valiantly go for and go after our mandate, and we expect to see results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ministry of Education.
The Ministry of Education has recommended, from our deliberations today, we recognize that we need to look at our monitoring and evaluation system. It means that we have to not only be collecting data that is relevant to the schools, but understanding that there is data out there and that we need to have an interagency, interministerial approach in terms of the data collection, the data analysis, the data reporting, and data sharing. We and the ministry recognize that we are not only to collect specific type of data that will allow us to make interventions, but in terms of being preventive, in terms of, as you said, in terms of tracking to ensure that the students that have in fact benefited, that the parents, the community, that we are seeing the change and a notable change. The intervention, as we said, we must understand data, and we must understand that the intervention must be contextualized, in that we should not have interventions that are just general, but specific to what is happening within our various education districts and our schools. We recognize also that we need to look at our staffing. If it is that we are providing a service, it must not only be in terms of reaction. We should not be in reacting mode in terms of having a team when an incident occurs, but it means that we have to be able to detect and remediate in a quick space of time. We, listening to all of that has been said, we really need to partner with the TTPS and continue the partnership with the Children's Authority in ensuring that we meet the needs of all of our children, that is from ECCE, even up to tertiary level. So I think we are poised to move ahead. It's just that from the lessons, from the information gathered here today and the discussions, we need to take most of the areas, take these areas on board as we plan and we move ahead in the Ministry of Education.
Thank you so much. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Honorable Chairman and members, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service clearly understands its role, a role which is critical in treating with the demands of a level of protection for the children of this nation. There's a suite of legislation available to us. The issue about its adequacy at this point in time, we will not be able to effectively comment on it. However, we intend to utilize the legislation in its full context, and over time we may be able to make that determination. At the present time, we have a specialized unit. That specialized unit is being fully staffed. We are not at the point where we want to be in relation to numbers, But on a continuous basis, we are adding staff to that unit so that they can provide the kind of service that is necessary in the present context of things and the demands for the service of the Child Protection Unit. Beyond the Child Protection Unit, we have the Victim and Witness Support Unit, which addresses the concerns of victims and witnesses to crime. And we are, at this present moment, also staffing out that unit. We are, at the moment, adding five victim and witness support officers to the unit, and we are also finalizing the employment of a manager. Those things will come to closure within the next 2 weeks, so that unit is effectively being strengthened. We are giving our full commitment, and we intend to work with all the agencies in a partnering role and a collaborative role, all geared towards ensuring that the children of this nation are protected. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Child Welfare League?
We are looking at reviewing our program to include the parents of the teenage mothers and also to do more community outreach, because the parents, in particular the single mothers, what is happening with them, the daughters are overriding their rules. And this is where we find most of the teenage pregnancy. And, we want to do more parenting courses, see if we can meet again with our stakeholders. We had other voluntary organizations who do work like us to get them on board with us to do some more work with the mothers. Some cases, they are single fathers. And also to see if we can reach out to the areas in the Southwestern District where there's a higher rate of teenage pregnancy.
Thank you so much. We've had a discussion today that has really exposed some areas as it relates to the issue of child abuse in Trinidad and Tobago. We've had here some of the agencies that deal directly with children in abusive situations, and what has come out is that there are more reported cases of child abuse. Whether it is that there are more cases, actually more offenses actually occurring, or there's a greater way now of more reporting of incidences. It is clear that it is a situation we have to look at, because in either case, it means that there is a present need that we have to attend to. The units that are specifically geared for dealing with children and abused children are just about 2 years old, coming on 2 years old with respect to the Child Protection Unit as well as the Children's Authority, and therefore there are issues in both cases with respect to understaffing and, of course, under-resourcing with respect to financial means. Some issues within the Ministry of Education as well with respect to the Student Support Services Division. Some things have come out with respect to filling of vacancies that process may be a problem, as well as the whole issue of having qualified staff to be able to function in some of the more specialized areas, especially dealing with long-term care for these children who may need it. We've spoken about the fact that detection of child abuse needs to be boosted, and there needs to be more interaction between the agencies that will detect abuse. Also, with respect to data collection, that needs to be more robust to be able to provide the kind of analysis that would assist in, for example, specifically gearing programs in different geographic areas to deal with child abuse and whatever particular type of child abuse is more prevalent in that area, so that our response can be a little more proactive than reactive. Because in some instances, based on all the factors and the challenges, we are so busy outing the fires that it's difficult to deal with the proactive response that would be the best practice. With respect to reduction, we've spoken about the whole of government approach, where it is not an issue for the Ministry of Education alone necessarily, or the Children's Authority alone, or the police service alone, but NGOs such as the Child Welfare League that also assist. And these networks exist within all of the stakeholders here, but it's just a matter of maybe, as was suggested by Children's Authority, coming to the point where there's some document that outlines and demarcates where the different roles come in, and so everyone is on the same page knowing where they come in with respect to the overall treatment of children who have been abused. So I want to thank the officials who have been here with us and who have been so very forthright in giving their answers to the questions that have been presented. And I want to thank our viewers and our listeners who were here with us, persons in the public gallery, as well as members of the committee who have been here, because this issue really presents a clear and present danger to the future of Trinidad and Tobago insofar as it impacts our children and their development. So I want to thank you again and thank the Secretariat of the committee, and I would like at this point to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.